Hello, my name is JD Breidenbach. I am a second year student at Tiffin University, and I'm super excited today to show you my second year presentation. For a little bit of background, I'm going to load up my first project, and while that happens, I'm going to explain a bit where my background is. When I came to Tiffin University, I was a drummer, I sang a little bit, and I had done a little bit of live sound work and a little bit of I kind of kicked rocks around in Logic Pro, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And what I'm going to play for you is a video clip that I sent into Tiffin University. You can see it says Disturbia demo, very official. And for those of you that have worked in a DAW before, it shouldn't really look like this. This is kind of a disorganized mess. And if you listen to how it sounds, so you can tell it's obviously a little bit rough. There's been better productions out there. But they give you an idea of where I was coming into all this. So we're going to jump into two separate projects today. The first one is going to be a mixing general track cohesion project, and the second one is going to be used for two different skills. And the first will be production engineering and kind of music theory and tying different pieces of a composition together. And the second part will be individual track processing, compression, EQ, and effects processing on a specific instrument. So we're going to start with this mixing template. This is a set of stems that I received as a homework assignment for my studio sound class with Professor Dan Myers. And this is what the song sounded like before mixing, before any processing. No effects on any of these channels, completely blank. And you can hear that the composition is actually pretty good. All the pieces are there, all of the instruments, they play well together, it fills out the mix nicely. It just needs a little bit of work. It needs cleaned up, it needs processed a bit. So I went through each track individually, did some work on them. I put some EQs, some de-essers, some compressors, some saturation on the vocals, panned them left and right, did some work to the electric guitar, the acoustic guitar, the piano, and on and so forth. A lot of processing on the drums to get them to cut through the mix and punch and process. This project with a little bit of individual track processing sounds like this with a rough gain mix. So you can hear already that's a lot better. The drums are a lot punchier, things are a lot cleaner and clearer and brighter, and everything's just a lot more present. But I figured that after all this processing, the vocals still sounded a little bit buried in the overall mix. So I thought, what can I do to pull these vocals out? It wasn't a problem that the vocals were too dense and too hidden in the mix. It was actually a problem that other instruments were burying it. So I used a plugin called Track Spacer. And Track Spacer is a bit of a specialty plugin. What you can do with it is you can sidechain another audio track to the track that Track Spacer is on. And what that lets you do is I sidechained the audio of the lead vocal to the melodic instruments. I sent these melodic instruments to a bus, the electric guitar, acoustic guitar, piano, and bass. I sent those to a bus, and then I threw Track Spacer on it and sidechained it to the main vocal. And you can see as the main vocal happens, it pulls down those same frequencies in the melodic instruments. Take a look here. And if I really crank it up, you can hear it, and it becomes super obvious. You can kind of hear how the vocal phases in and out, and the rest of the instruments kind of pulse into existence when Track Spacer really kicks in. But done subtly, it's a nice effect to really put the vocals at the front of the mix. It takes back these more aggressive melodic instruments and lets the vocals take the forefront. And that's just a small thing you can do with the mix. The drums are another great example. The drums sounded fine all on their own, but as soon as I threw a bus compressor on all the drums, they were really present and they really punch hard, and it sounds like they all glue together nicely. Just a lot better drum processing already. And then finally, to top it all off, I added two finishing plugins, an instance of Neutron and an instance of Ozone. And what both of these do Neutron is a kind of mixing specific plugin. Ozone's a bit of a mastering plugin. And I wouldn't consider this track fully mastered. It's kind of a rough master, but it'll give you an idea for the different instances and the different sub-plugins in each of these things happening. So I started out with Neutron, an instance of Sculptor, which is kind of an AI-based smart dynamic EQ, and it boosts some pleasant frequencies, cuts some negative frequencies. So it overall makes a very pleasant, you can see it kind of happening and working here, the orange line. It's subtle, but it is happening all right. And then I also added a compressor on the mix bus, the overall sends of all of the instruments. And you can see it cuts down the peaks just a little tiny bit, just starts bringing the tops down and starting to make everything glue together. Then, I did some dynamic EQ, some EQ processing, cutting negative frequencies, boosting positive ones, and then I did an imager, which is affecting the stereo spread, where things are in the sonic field. And I took the low frequencies, everything below, 150 hertz or so, and I put them right in the center. I actually pulled them in from the side, so that all the lows frequencies, the punch of the kick drum and the bass guitar, they live in the center, so it's not spreading out to the sides and muddying up the mix. It's spread very into the center. The mid-range and the kind of high mid-range are a little more in the center. Then the higher stuff I spread way out to the sides, make a very dynamic stereo mix. Here it's spread very well. You can see it in the image there. Then I added a limiter, maximizer at the end, and some multi-band compression at the very end to kind of tie all the pieces together, make sure all the frequency curves were working nicely together, and everything just played nice. You can see it kind of work here. So just to tie it all together, this is the unaffected mix, and I'll cut back in and turn on my mix and give you the A to B. Without processing. With. So you can really hear, my mix, the work that I did, really cleaned things up. It brightened it up a lot. And I could spend a long time diving a lot deeper into the mix. But the thing to understand here is that some subtle things can go a long way. And the other thing to understand is in 2 years, I came quite a long way just from that original Disturbia demo. So we're going to close this first project and transition to the next one. And while that's happening, I'll take a moment to show you the space that this next song was recorded in, and actually the space that I'm recording this video in right now. So this is the studio that I'm working out of. I use Logic Pro, I've got a nice MIDI keyboard, I've got some monitors, I've got a couple of hardware synths off to the side of me here, and I've got a MIDI drum kit and some guitars and basses to my right. And for those of you that don't know, I started a business with my parents in 2018 here in Tiffin, Ohio, and that business is B Pro Homes. I'll flash the logo there for you. But what we do is we're real estate, and it's not music, it's not related to anything else at all. But what it taught me, and what a lot of those lessons taught, is that it's so important to invest in yourself and in your education and in the tools that you use. So that's a huge part of why I came to TU and why I've pushed myself so hard. Working full time at a business while going to school as a music major, I've had to make a lot of sacrifices, and I've had to have a lot of kind of sleepless nights and more difficult times, but it's worth it to me because, and it really, I think this project displays why I've done what I've done. I've had a lot of focus in my time here at TU in the performance side of things, more than just the studio, the technical side. I've spent a lot of time, I've had 2 years of singing lessons. I've had songwriting and composition lessons for the past year. I've had a music success seminar and a lot of different focuses on stuff that's not necessarily the technical side of things. When you spend so much long in the technical side, breaking down plugins and pulling apart frequencies, it becomes a numbers game. And mixing and being a producer, there's a lot more to it than just a science. There's an art to it. And what's more than that, there's a people element to it. So what I'm going to show you in this next project is why this other stuff matters. Why it's so important to be a good vocalist. For example, even if you are, training to be a technician. So we'll break this apart. This song was brought to me by a close friend of mine. He's a vocalist, a ukulele player, and I've done a lot of live work with him, but he never really had a lot of experience in the studio setting, not recording, no software, that kind of stuff. And this song, he says, I've got a song here, knowing that I'm a music major. Can we record this? Can we work together and get this song recorded? And I go, yeah, absolutely. So I bring him down to the studio space, and this is what he had. This is what he threw at me to begin with.
I'm drowning in my pride. Can't show this hurt outside.
So you can hear it's decent, it's got a decent foundation. It's just a little bit simple, obviously it's just a 2-part song, ukulele and a vocal mic. So, we started talking, and I started asking, what's the feel you want? What's the style? How can we break this apart and diversify this song? And I started pulling out synthesizers and different effects and saying, well, is this a sound you want? Is this an effect you want? Is this the feel, the style you're going for? Are you looking for something different? And eventually, we landed on a set of violins. Right, he liked the violins. So we had the ukulele, we had the violins, and we had the vocal going. Just help fleshing things out a little bit, adding chords behind it. And then, of course, we had to flush it out with bass and fill out the very low end of the sub bass. And then as we roll in the chorus here, we want to add some percussion. And you can hear the whole song kind of ties itself together all of a sudden. And this is just basic music theory knowledge. This came from my musicianship courses, learning how to add chords and follow chord progressions and figure out what they are, and add seventh chords and add stuff that might not have been there in the original composition. But, as we started adding these pieces, I saw him getting more excited. And as he sort of realized the possibility of what a producer could do and what the studio environment could do. And so we started talking about this bridge, how do we want this bridge to feel? Well, let's make it spacey, right? Let's add some an effect to the voice, and let's add a spacey background vocal, right?
It won't be okay.
And it's subtle, but then we start scaling, and then he kind of gets this wild look in his eye, and he goes, let's add some harmonies. Okay, man, we can add some harmonies. And then this is what I think is so cool. The question that came up was, well, how do you write good harmonies? How do you make something like that sound good? How do you compose that? And I said, well, you happen to be talking to a musicianship student with Professor Alex Manfredo. You're in the right place. It's funny, but it's true, because in that class, I learned how to compose chords. I learned music theory. When I came, I was a drummer. I knew nothing about chord progressions and about anything like that. And now I'm a keyboard player at a fairly competent amateur level. I can play keyboard fairly well. I can play bass quite competently, and I'm learning guitar as we speak, and I'm getting the hang of that very well too, as well as improving my vocal skills immensely since I arrived. And it's all of these different pieces, the performance side of things, that's more than just technical pieces that are really important. Because I'm at a point now where I can take the things that I've learned and help other people with it. And that's what I did here. I says, okay, let's write some harmonies. Let's add a third, let's add a fifth, let's add a seventh, let's add an octave. And so we fleshed out this end part with some harmonies. And they're subtle, but and it's towards the end of the song, we had another crazy idea. Let's go all the way in. Let's add some gang vocals. Let's go big with it. Let's go poppy. Let's get it really exciting and finish this song off super strong. So we did. And it's stuff like this that I just find so cool. Because when I sent this project out, finished, after I mixed and mastered it, and I could tell how excited he was and how awesome this song was. It was seeing that vision come to life that made all the difference for me. It was seeing how excited my friend got making this song. That's why I've spent the long times making my work schedule work with my school schedule, and why I've spent so much time and energy in my classes here at Tiffin University, and why I've really appreciated my lessons with my professors, because like I said, I've been able to take it beyond myself. We'd be recording a vocal take, and he would go, oh man, I'm having a little trouble hitting this note, or I can't quite get to something. And I'd say, well, it's okay, let's try this technique. Nod your head back and forth while you're singing just a little bit. And if any of you are TU students watching this, all of you have had that done to you by a professor, I'm sure, at this point. But if you've not, that's a tension releasing exercise. And, or I'd say, well, you're hitting kind of a high vowel there that's very tight and closed. Let's see if we can open that up and take it to a big, give you more space to hit that note, and something that's going to be easier for you to deliver on that high note at that point. And that's all stuff that I was taught by my professors. That I didn't come up with any of it. I'm just recycling the knowledge that I've learned. And again, that's my why. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I love it. This song, it isn't exactly the kind of music that I want to make. It isn't exactly the kind of stuff that is my bread and butter, but seeing someone get so excited about it, seeing this vision come to life from what it used to be, well, that makes it a lot worth it. And before we get too terribly sappy, let's dive into some of the specific production. We'll start with the ukulele down here. And this is the ukulele on its own. This is the ukulele just raw recorded, no effects. And so I started with some surgical EQ, just taking out some negative frequencies, cutting out the really muddy low end. Did a bit of mid-side high boosting. Then I added another instance of Sculptor, that I talked about before. This one specifically with a curve for an acoustic guitar. A little bit different, but it's similar to ukulele. And I like the way that it pulled out the mid-range frequencies here, boosted the high frequencies very pleasantly, and brought in some of that low range very nicely again. And then I put on a split EQ, which is a transient and tonal EQ. Basically, it allows me to customize the transients in a very pleasant way that I liked on this thing. An instance of Smooth Operator, which deals with some resonances and some remaining gross notes and bringing out some of the nice notes and resonances in there. Multiband compressors to kind of tie everything back together. And then, because it was a little bit bright in the final mix, I just cut the very, very high presence out of it, just a smudge, and added a touch of reverb to clear it all together. So again, here's a ukulele without. With. So you can hear that already improves it a lot. We'll jump into the vocal here very quickly here too as we wrap things up. So
somewhere out there,
no effects, nothing there. Did some surgical EQ and de-essing.
Somewhere out there.
Then I threw a compressor on it. This is kind of a slow attack compressor, just smoothing out the surgical EQ pieces that was taken out and removed.
Somewhere out there.
Then I added a Pultec emulation to bring back some of that brightness and clean up and brighten the vocal a bit.
Somewhere out there.
Added a multi-band compressor to again smooth things out a little more, this time in specific frequency ranges. And then I added a finished compressor to just smooth things out, finish it, take it the rest of the way.
Out there.
You can really hear that one helps bring it forward and kind of find its place in the mix. And then I finished it out with a little more surgical EQ, just because this vocal had a lot of weird tonal stuff happening, and the space was recorded in the microphone, whatever it was, it just needed some little extra work at the end after all the compression. So that's what I did. Then I put a micro shift and some gain on it for effects and for volume automation, in the bridge.
Waiting our fate.
That spacey kind of sound, and then again you end up with this finished vocal.
Somewhere out there.
Again, unprocessed.
Somewhere out there. Somewhere out there.
And again, it's a lot of little subtle things, but they combine to make a very nice finished product. And again, this is the stuff that I love to do. It's taking something that might not have ever existed without my intervention, and kind of pushing it to the finish line and saying, hey, we can make this happen. We can make this thing what you want it to be. And as I wrap up here and finish my presentation, I just wanted to take a moment and give a special thanks to my professors that I've worked with, and anybody else that I've had the opportunity to make music with or work with in my last couple of years here at Tiffin University. As you saw when I came here, I didn't know what I was doing. I was very amateurish, and I had a lot of energy and excitement, but I didn't really know where to direct it or what to do with it, and I was kind of clueless in a lot of ways. And these past couple of years at Tiffin University have really clarified my vision and my direction and where I want to go and what I want to do with my music career. And I wouldn't have been able to do any of it without my professors or the amazing help that I've gotten along the way. So thank you all so much. I'm a part of an amazing sophomore class, and we've had a lot of other great presentations, and it's shown me that, I've learned a lot, but I've still got a lot to learn, and I'm super excited to continue my education here at Tiffin University and to keep working with all of these amazing people. So thank you so much. I've been JD. Feel free if you ever get in contact with me. I'd love to work with you. I'm sure we'll talk at some point. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you listening in, and have a wonderful, fantastic day.